Good afternoon, ma'am. So, the topic that we will tackle for today is about the taxation in the Philippines. So, what is taxation? Taxation is defined in many ways, such as it is the process by which the sovereign, through its lawmaking body, raises revenues used to pay expenses of government. It is a means of government in increasing its revenue under the authority of the law, purposely to use to promote welfare and protection of its citizenry. It is the collection of the share of individual and organizational income by a government under the authority of law. So, in short, taxation is a practice of collecting taxes that was imposed by the government from the individuals based on their earnings and property. So, ginagamit ang mga taxes to promote welfare and protection of the government na nakabase sa authority of the law. So, punta naman tayo sa concept ng tax. Taxation is the inherent power of the state o yung taglay na kapangyarihan ng otoridad na mag-inflict and demand contribution upon persons, properties, rights for the purpose of generating revenues for public purposes. It is the power of taxation upon necessity and is inherent in every government or sovereignty. So, ginagawa ng every government yung pagko-collect ng tax. Next is, there are three distinctions of tax. Number one is, tax is distinguished from a toll. Yung toll, it is a fee paid for some liberty or privileges. Example nito is yung charge of a long-distance telephone call. A tax is demand in the sovereignty while toll is demand for ownership. And a tax is paid for the use of government's property while a toll is paid for the use of another's property. A tax may also be imposed by the government only while a toll is implemented by the government or a private entity. So, yung tax is yung ini-impose lang ng government, while yung toll yung pwedeng implement ng government or yung private entity. Number 2, tax is distinguished from penalty. A tax is intended to raise revenue, while penalty is designed to regulate conduct. And a tax may be implemented by the government only, while a penalty may be imposed by the government or a private individual. So, yun nga yung sinabi ko sa taas na yung government lang yung nag-i-implement ng tax. Yung sa penalty, pwedeng sa yung government or yung private entity. Next is, tax is distinguished from debt. Yung debt is yung utang. And a tax is based on law while debt is based on contract. Yung kapag nangutang ka, may kontrata or yung papeles na pinipirmahan on both sides. And a tax is generally payable in cash while debt is payable in any kind or cash. Yung tax is hindi pwedeng in kind yung pagbabayad mo but money only or yung cash. And a person may be imprisoned for non-payment of taxes but any person may not be imprisoned for non-payment of debt. So, kung hindi ka nakapambayad ng mga taxes mo, yung pwede kang makasuhan at makulong, and then sa debt naman, pwedeng hindi ka makulong kahit hindi ka magbayad. Ganun. So, punta naman tayo sa history of taxation in the Philippines. During the ancient Filipinos o nung pre-colonial period, yung buwis is the term for tax noon, and yung binabayaran nila ang kanilang buwis sa datu or yung leader nila sa isang community. And everyone is required to pay their taxes except yung datu or yung chieftains. Kapag hindi ka nakapagbayad ng tax mo noon, is may punishment na ini-implement during those period. So, punta naman tayo sa Spanish period. During the Spanish period, they implemented the modern concept of taxation, wherein 16 years old to 60 years old were forced to pay tributes or tribute to the King of Spain through the colonial government worth 8 reals or 1 peso per year, or they can pay through giving gold, chickens, textile, rice, and forced labor or yung poloy servisyo. Noong 1884 naman, na tribute was abolished, na tanggal na yung modern concept of taxation na ipinatupad ng mga Spaniards, and it was replaced by the cedula. A cedula is a certificate and identifying the taxpayer that needs to be carried all the time. And if someone is not able to present their cedula to the Guardia Civil, they will be imprisoned for being indocumentado, which means they are lack valid document or legal personal identification necessary to prove their identity. So, next is sa 1987 Philippine Constitution. States that it sets limitation on the exercise of the power of tax. The rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable. So, maging pantay-pantay na. And then the Congress shall evolve a progressive system of taxation, wherein the Philippines covers both local and national. Local taxes are those imposed and collected by the local government, while the national taxes refers to the national internal revenue taxes collected by the national government through the BIR o yung Bureau of Internal Revenue. And the late President Rodrigo Duterte implemented the Train Law, or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, which was signed last January 1, 2018. And the law seeks to correct a number of deficiencies in the tax system to make it simpler, fairer, and more efficient, wherein the rich will have a bigger contribution and the poor will benefit more from the government's program and services. Okay, doon naman tayo sa purposes and significance of tax. May dalawang purpose yung tax. Number 1 is yung primary purposes. Promotes fund or revenues used to defray expenses incurred by the government in promoting general welfare of its citizenry, yung public expenditures. The other purpose is to equitably contribute to the wealth of the nation para mag-contribute sa economy ng ating bansa. Okay. So, may 7 karakteristik ang tax. Number 1 is yung enforced contribution o yung mandatory na payment. Its payment is mandatory in nature, yun nga yung sabi ko. And then the enforcement is independent upon the will of the person taxed. Number 2 is tax is payable in cash. Kaya nga nang sabi ko kanina, cash lang yung pwedeng ipambayad natin sa cash, hindi pwedeng in kind. Number 3, it is appropriate in character. Payment of taxes should be based on the ability to pay principal. Yung ability to pay principal is, it was believed na kung ano yung kaya ng isang taxpayer na ipambayad sa buwis niya is yun lang yung isisingilin sa kanya. And number 4 is, it is levied on a person's property. There are taxes that are imposed on acts, rights, or privileges. Number 5, it is imposed by the state which has jurisdiction over the property or person. And as a general rule, only person, properties, acts, right, or transaction within the jurisdiction of the taxing state are subjects of taxation. So, yung mga naka-under sa isang bansa, yun lang ata yung sinisingil. And then, number 6, it is levied by the law-making body of the state. This means that a prior law must be enacted first by the Congress before assessment. And collection may be implemented of the 1987 Constitution. Number 7, it is imposed for public purposes. Taxes are imposed to support the government from the implementation of projects and programs. So, yung mga taxes na nakokolek, ginagawa ito para sa mga projects, yung mga programs na ginagawa ng o ini-implement ng mga gobyerno. Also, may classification din ang tax. Number 1 is as a subject matter. Personal capitation o yung example is yung residence tax, yung property tax, yung pagpapamay-ari mo, o yung real estate tax. As to those who bears the burden, the direct and the indirect tax. So, yung direct tax is it is the taxation on income, or example nito is yung income tax, property tax, ganon, or yung corporation tax. And while the indirect tax is the taxation on expenditure. Example is nito yung VAT, yung sales tax, service duty, or yung excise duty. Number 4 is yung as a purpose. So, yung general tax din is these are taxes on goods, services that was purchased by the consumer, while the special tax is future taxes, yung mga pinaglalaan nila, yung tax na nakokolekt is inilalaan sa future yung expenses. And number 4 is yung scope, the national tax and the local tax. Na-discuss naman na to sa taas. So, there are also principles of taxation. Number 1 is administrative feasibility, wherein this principle signify that in a victorious tax system, such tax should be clear and plain to taxpayers, effective of implementation by a sufficient and well-trained staff or public office, and it is appropriate as to the time and manner payment, and not excessively burdensome upon on discouraging to business, scheme, or activity. Number 2 is consistency and compatibility with economic goals. It is compatible dapat yung ano. This refers to the laws of taxes that should be persistent with economic goals or programs of the government. And these are the basic services na maring ipamigay sa mga tao. And there are also tax exemption. Number 1 is yung religious institution, charitable institution, non-profit, non-stock educational institution, o yung mga hindi kumikitang mga institution ng ating bansa, non-profit cemeteries, government institutions, and foreign diplomats. Okay, so punta naman tayo sa how to compute income tax in the Philippines. Computing tax expense and payable is different for individual and corporations. Taxable corporations may be taxed using a fixed income tax rate. Yung fixed income tax rate is a lump sum tax that is not measured as a percentage of the tax, and it was based on income, wealth, or consumption. However, if you are self-employed professional or an owner of a single business, your income tax is computed using a graduated tax, and graduated tax is also called a progressive tax, which means the tax rate increases as the payable base amount increases. In other words, the higher taxable income you possess, the higher your income tax. And thank you for listening.